The power dies. The board votes at dawn. "Stay with me tonight," she whispers, his fingers counting 4 in, 6 out on her wrist. The elevator dings. When those doors open, everything they swore to protect is on the line. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe, tap like and share this video. The more voices we reach, the louder these stories become. And drop your city in the comments. Let's see where love finds us. Rain feathered down the 37th floor like static, clinging to the glass until the city blurred into a watercolor of brake lights and late-night neon. Nora Kingsley stood barefoot on the slate floor of her office, her bone-white blazer thrown over a black silk cami and pencil skirt that hugged every unapologetic curve. She could command a room at noon. At midnight, the rooms commanded her. The board's memo glowed on her screen like a low-grade fever: sell by morning or step aside. Her stomach grumbled with the stubbornness of a machine left running too long. She hadn't eaten since an 11 a.m. meeting that had gone 3 hours and left her with a headache made of spreadsheets. Nora opened the delivery app, mostly to feel like she could still choose something. Soup, half a sandwich, ginger tea, anything warm. When the app pinged back with a driver assigned, she took a breath that snagged like a zipper catching fabric. The elevator chimed and the floor lights dimmed for a heartbeat, just a flicker, but it made every window look like a blank eye. She rubbed her thumb across the inside of her wrist, where the skin warmed fast, the trick her therapist gave her for grounding. Funny to need grounding when she had 67% of a global tech company hanging from her name. Security called up to say the driver had arrived and needed access. "Late hour," the guard murmured, meaning the building had rules about who went where and when. Nora hesitated, aware of how it would look. The thick, curvy white CEO with a reputation for winning and for working through the night, summoning a stranger into the fortress. Yet the thought of the lobby's fluorescent chill was unbearable. "Send him up," she said. "I'll meet him at the elevator." When the doors opened, he stepped out with the brown paper bag held steady in both hands. Tall, broad-shouldered, rain prickling his jacket into a dark sheen. He had the kind of presence that comes from carrying other people's nights, packages, pizzas, punctured plans, without dropping them. "Miss Kingsley?" His voice was warm, low, careful. She nodded. "Nora, it's just Nora tonight." "Malik," he said, offering a small palm-open greeting rather than a handshake, as if he knew some nights were better with less touch. "Your ginger tea is trying to melt through the carrier. Where should I set it?" "Conference table," she said, leading him past the glass partitions. From this angle, the city looked less like power and more like a scattering of lives in tiny lit boxes. She felt suddenly aware of her body, of the weight of it, the heat, the way the blazer framed her softness and strength. She had weaponized her curves in boardrooms, but here, barefoot, she felt human in a way that made her eyes sting. He unpacked the bag with precise hands. Soup container, lid loosened a quarter turn. Teacup, sleeve aligned with seam, sandwich cut on the bias. There was care in it that didn't belong to an algorithm. "Rough night?" he asked, not prying, just making space in case something needed to be set down. She laughed, a short, bright sound that surprised her. The kind where you make one decision and lose 3 things you can't name, where the rain won't pick a lane. She looked at the tea as if it could answer. "Thank you for coming up. I didn't want to face the lobby lights." "I get that," he said. "I do the late shift because the city goes quiet in a way I can hear. Less noise, more truth." He glanced toward the wall of glass. "Storm's only getting louder, though." As if called by the word, wind shouldered the building, and the floor gave a subtle, unnerving sway. The lights flickered again, longer this time, then held. Nora felt the old panic rise. Once in a stalled elevator at 19, she'd learned how close fear sits to the skin. "Hate that," she said, softer than she meant to. "Back when I cooked nights," Malik said, "we had a generator that coughed like an old dog. Every flicker I'd count with my breath. In for 4, out for 6. It keeps the body from lying to you." He lifted his hands, an open-palm gesture she didn't know she needed. "You want to try?" Everything in her had been optimized to reject help that wasn't billable. But something about the way he stood, solid, present, not impressed by her name or afraid of it, made refusal feel like pretending. She nodded. He counted, in on 4, out on 6. She felt her shoulders drop half an inch she hadn't been aware she was holding. "Better?" he asked. "A little," she said, then corrected herself, because accuracy mattered even in the quiet. "A lot." Her phone buzzed on the table. CFO. She let it ring out. Another buzz. An investor tagged her in a press rumour. Like she turned the phone face down, then turned it off entirely, the way you'd close the eyes of a thought that had suffered enough. Malik's expression didn't change, didn't judge. He handed her the tea. "Sips, not gulps," he said. "The ginger will boss your stomach around if you let it." "You cooked nights?" she asked, grateful for neutral ground. "Before deliveries," he said. "Before my mother's knees gave up and I became the driver with a schedule that could bend around doctor days. Food is still food, though. You move it from one set of hands that needs it to another." She tasted the soup. Carrot, coriander, a heat that unfurled. "You talk like someone who knows the difference between full and fed." He smiled, as though she'd caught him at something he didn't mind confessing. Learned it the hard way. Thunder rolled over the building like a cart across floorboards. The lights surrendered for a full second this time, and when they came back, the room felt as if it had been held under water and released. Somewhere down the hall, an emergency door latch clacked. Nora tried the old trick again, in on 4, out on 6. Her chest obeyed, but her hands had started to tremble. Malik looked toward the elevator. If power hiccups again, they might lock the cars at the lobby. I can wait a bit, let the worst of it pass. He checked the time, the storm radar on his phone, then her face. "Only if you want." She wanted. The wanting felt as simple and necessary as the soup. Not romance. Not yet. Not anything that would fit into a headline, but company that didn't ask for a piece of her company. She gestured at the chairs near the glass. "I could use a witness while I pretend this plan on my screen is going to save the day." He sat, not at the head or the foot of the table, but adjacent, the way someone sits when they're there to help carry, not critique. "What's the plan?" she told him. The sale, the pivot, the line item that felt like breaking a promise to the engineers who'd built it. He listened in a way that slowed her words into something she could hear. Sometimes he nodded. Sometimes he said, "What if you widen that margin?" Or, "What does it cost you to keep the thing that keeps you human?" The questions opened small windows in the wall she'd been bricking up all week. At some point she realized she was laughing again. Real laughter, the messy kind that doesn't look good in a mirror. He laughed too, and the sound sat warm between them like good bread. When the wind leaned hard against the glass, he didn't look away from her, and for once she felt like the center did not have to hold all by itself. A floor vent exhaled. The building sighed. The storm kept talking to itself. Nora blinked at the clock and saw how deep into the night they'd travelled. "I've kept you," she said, guilt nipping. "You must have a route, a life." "I've got both," he said, "and they can wait 20 more minutes for the sky to stop arguing." He glanced at her empty soup container. "You ate. That's already a win." She touched the rim of the container as if it were a medal from a race she hadn't meant to run. "Stay until the lights quit teasing," she said. "I think I've been brave for too many hours in a row." He nodded. "Then let's borrow brave from the minutes, not the hours." He slid his phone across the table face up, a small offer of transparency. No notifications stacked like accusations. Just the radar map thick with blue. Looks like a gap after this band. They sat in that widening gap, talking about small things that turned out to be large. The best kind of ginger, young, with thin skin. Shoes that tell the truth about their owners. The way the city's power grid hums when you press your ear to a tired window. By the time the rain softened, the plan on her screen didn't look kinder, but it looked truer, and truth had a softness of its own. When he finally stood, the building was steady again. He gathered the bag, the tea sleeve, the careful debris of a late-night mercy. "You'll be okay," he said, not as a question or a promise, but as a reading, like a cook tasting a sauce and nodding that it would hold. "I don't know what okay means anymore," she said. "It means you'll breathe and do the next kind thing you can afford," he said. He hesitated at the elevator, then added, "If you need a witness again, order the ginger tea. I'll know." The doors closed on his reflection and the storm's last sigh. Alone, Nora looked at her plan, at the city, at her hands no longer trembling. She turned the phone back on, and before the buzzes could swarm, she pressed her thumb into the warm spot on her wrist and counted in for 4, out for 6. Somewhere in the elevator shaft a cable purred. Somewhere in her chest something unclenched. The night wasn't over. But she wasn't alone in it anymore. Not exactly, not in the way that counted. Don't forget to subscribe for more intense cinematic love stories. Your click helps us make the next chapter. Rain didn't stop so much as change shape. Around 1, it turned to a steadier sheet, like someone had laid a grey silk scarf over the city and pressed down. Nora worked, rearranged, unrearranged. The plan on her screen began to look like a house she knew wasn't safe but couldn't stop shoring. She saved 5 versions with slightly different names and drank the last of the ginger tea cold. The floor shivered. Once, twice. Lights blinked, hesitated, and then dark. Emergency strips along the baseboards flicked to life, a soft amber that made the conference room feel like a stage set after the audience had left. Somewhere far below, a generator coughed. The HVAC wound down, leaving the kind of silence that makes you inventory your own pulse. Her phone lit. Security. She answered. Miss Kingsley, we've got a grid hiccup citywide. Elevators are pausing at floors and holding. We're on backup power, but cars are locked. Shelter in place until we clear it. You alone up there? Nora looked at the doorway where Malik had disappeared less than 15 minutes earlier. I wasn't. We have a driver name on the log, Malik Arden. The car froze at 34, doors pledged, then cycled open. He opted to wait near your floor to avoid the stairwell rush. Do you want him escorted out by stairs when it's safe, or... She imagined him in that narrow lobby alcove with the emergency lights making everyone look like a rumour. Please ask him to come back, she said before she could think it into something more polite. If he wants, if he's comfortable. Copy, the guard said, the word thick with static. We'll log it. Footsteps in the corridor unhurried. A knock, not a pound, not a tap, but a patient 1, 2, 3 that gave her time to breathe between each. She opened the door. He stood there with rain on his jacket's shoulders like sequins, eyes adjusting to the amber gloom. Looks like the city asked us to be neighbours, he said, a half smile softening the edges of the night. Come in. She heard how much that sounded like relief and let it. Security said to shelter in place. He took in the room, the low light, the screensaver that had bloomed into a gentle galaxy on her monitor. You okay? She nodded, then remembered honesty had been the only useful currency between them. She tilted her hand side to side. Define okay. Breathing counts, he said, setting his phone on the table face up again like a promise. Want more tea? I can coax something out of that office kettle. He improvised with the confidence of a man who'd warmed more meals in less likely kitchens. He found fresh ginger in the office fridge. An assistant with good instincts must have stocked it, and a lemon that had rolled to the back of the drawer. He shaved paper-thin slices with a plastic knife, nested them in a mug, and poured water that was hot enough to try. Sips, he said, sliding the mug to her. Let it boss you kindly. They sat in the amber hush. The building spoke in small throat clears, ducts settling, water moving, distant doors meeting frames. Outside, the storm drummed a steady beat, metronome true. Malik angled his chair not to face her or the window, but slightly off, a geometry of presence that didn't crowd. What were you before deliveries? She asked, watching the lemon oils blur the surface. A cook, he said, line, then Seuss. Friendly fire of a kitchen, burns that don't blister until your shift's done. I liked the rhythm. Didn't like what it did to my mother's calendar. When her knees started negotiating, I needed a schedule that could kneel with them. He rubbed his thumb over a pale scar across his knuckles. Deliveries give me windows. I use them. To do what? Breathe, he said, smiling, then after a beat, and write menus I don't have a place for yet. She pictured him at a small table with a pencil and a stubborn hope, naming dishes like prayers. You're building a thing. Feels more like tending, he said, and then, because the night was long and truth was cheap, you? I've been proving I don't drop anything I carry, she said. The confession startled them both by how much it weighed when said aloud. When I was 22, I bought my first company in a room where someone's smile felt like a hand over my mouth. Tonight the board wants me to pretend selling a line is just math. She flicked through the windows on her screen, the ones that still glowed on battery like lanterns. I used to know where the line ended, and I began. He watched her as if she were describing a street he'd walked. What if you widen the definition of not dropping to include setting something down where it won't break? She swallowed, the ginger heat making a clean path. I drafted a letter. It sounds like I'm apologizing to money. Let's hear the bones, he said. She read it. In the low light, the words sounded older, as if they'd been waiting under her desk for months. He listened without interrupting, then pointed to 2 sentences. Here you're making a promise you don't have to make, and here you hide what you're really protecting. What am I protecting? She asked, genuinely curious, genuinely afraid of the answer. The people who built the thing, he said. You can sell without selling them out. Say that in your voice, not theirs. She rewrote. He watched the paragraphs hinge and open. When she slowed, he didn't push. When she rushed, he counted her back to the reasonable tempo of breath. In for 4, out for 6. The new letter was shorter. It made no threats. It made a boundary. At 2:38, her phone buzzed with a message from the CFO. Investors leaning toward full divest. Prepare language. The room tilted, just a hair, and she felt a vertigo that had nothing to do with height. She sat on the floor next to the long window, knees up, blazer slipping open over the black silk that hugged and blessed every soft plane of her. Malik didn't drop to the floor beside her as if they were already close. He lowered himself to sit a measured arm's distance away, angled palms open on his knees. You want company down there or space? Company, she said, the word leaving her like a cloud that had held too long. But, she gestured in the air as if drawing a circle of her own shape. Ask before you know. Do anything. Always, he said. Can I put my jacket over your shoulders? It's warm from the kettle steam. She nodded. He still moved slow, hovering the jacket first, letting her see and decide, then settling it around her with a care that borrowed nothing she hadn't offered. Heat and weight, the scent of rain and the ghost of spice. She felt her breath speed up and named it. Not fear, not exactly, the body calling a meeting with itself. Left wrist? He asked. So I can count with you. Yes, she said, and held her wrist out. His fingers didn't close around it. He placed 2 fingertips just barely there, a metronome of presence. In for 4, out for 6. When she started to rush the out-breath, he slowed his count, and her lungs followed like a good student. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't look. The amber light, the rain, his steady count, something in it rewired the way the panic passed through. It didn't vanish. It loosened. Tell me something true from before all this, he said softly. My mother taught me to hem, Nora said, surprising herself with the memory. She'd say, clothes are agreements with your day, make them fit. On my first 24-hour push at the firm, I used dental floss to fix a dress because we had no thread and I had to look like I slept. He laughed, gentle and impressed. Resourceful. What about you? I'm good at making food with no right ingredients, he said. Once did Thanksgiving on a 2-burner hot plate because the apartment gas line sulked. I told my sister scarcity makes a new menu. She still calls my Mac and please every time she wants comfort. They sat with their small, true stories warming the room. At 3:15, the generator found a cleaner rhythm. The emergency lights brightened by a whisper. She rewrote the letter one more time and saved it as valve, because that's what it felt like, not a punt or a surrender, but a way to let pressure out without exploding the whole floor. Sleep came for them in rolls, then receded. He dozed upright for a 10-minute drift, chin tucked, then opened his eyes when the building breathed differently. She stretched, the jacket sliding, the silk catching light in quiet curves. He looked away not because her body was a thing to avoid, but because it was a thing to respect. She saw the choice and felt safer for it. By 4, the storm began to tire. She tried the elevator button out of habit. Nothing. She didn't mind. The night, strange as it was, had become livable. Tell me what you'll do at 8, he said, not pressing the horizon closer, just sketching it. I'll read this letter to a room that thinks my mouth exists to say yes, she said. I'll keep the core team, even if I have to call it a spin-out. I'll name what we're protecting without pretending it's cheap, and I'll eat breakfast before I do. His smile was quiet pride. I can bring hand pies at 7:45, lemon ginger, a little bossy. You'd come back? She heard the break in her voice and let that stand too. He lifted his palms in that steady, offered way. if you want to witness again." She looked at the rain sliding down the glass like someone had finally found a consistent stroke. "I want that," she said. Then, softer. "Stay until morning?" He didn't dramatize the word. "Yes." He shifted to the couch, kicked off his shoes, and folded his long frame with the competence of a man who'd slept in worse places and learned how not to take more space than he was given. "Wake me if your chest starts lying." She kept working a while longer, then let her head tip back. The jacket held the last of the kettle's heat. Malik breathed in a measurable, calming line, and without asking her to match it, her lungs did. The night stopped arguing. The city, even under silk, was still there. At 4:44, somewhere deep in the building, a relay clicked, and the faintest hum returned to the bones of the floor. It sounded like morning rehearsing. Nora closed her eyes and, for the first time in a week, didn't dream of falling. Dawn arrived like a promise no one was sure they'd made. The building found its hum again, low, steady, almost shy, vibrating up through the slate floor into Nora's bare feet. She'd fallen asleep in the conference chair with Malik's jacket over her shoulders and her laptop's screen dimmed to a dark lake. The storm had rinsed the city. The windows were clean enough to mistake for open air. Across the room, Malik slept on the couch in the posture of a man who knew how to rest anywhere, shoes lined neatly under the table, one arm tucked, breath drawing even lines. She counted along, 4 in, 6 out, without moving. Calm isn't the absence of fear, the night had taught her. It's the presence of something faithful. Her phone vibrated with the morning's first obligations. Calendar squares stacked themselves into a wall. 7, pre-brief with CFO. 8, bored. She stood, the silk cami brushing her ribs, and stretched until the joints along her spine gave polite little pops. The mirror in the corridor reflected a woman she recognized and didn't. Bone-white blazer over curves she'd never again apologize for, hair looser than a CEO's handbook would prefer, mouth set not in defiance but in decision. "Clothes are agreements with your day," she heard her mother say. "Make them fit." Malik stirred when the kettle sighed. He blinked at her, took in the morning, and softened into a smile that made the whole night feel like it had happened on purpose. "How's your chest?" he asked, 2 fingers hovering near his own wrist, not assuming the right to touch. "Truthful," she said. "Hungry." He checked the time. "I promised breakfast." "You did." Elevators sang alive in the hall, the cheerful little arpeggios that buildings use to pretend they've never failed a day in their lives. He stood and slipped on his shoes. "I can be back by 7:45, he said. "Lemon ginger hand pies, a little bossy." Her eyebrows rose. "You have those on standby in your trunk like a culinary superhero?" "I have a friend who opens a bakery at 6, he said. "I barter dishwashing for favours. Also, I sent a text at 4 when the generator flirted with clarity." He glanced at the windows, the loosened sky. "You want them?" "Yes," she said then, surprising herself with the strength of it, "and I want you to come back." He lifted his palms. "I hear you. I accept. I'll do it gently. Back soon." He left his jacket warm still, steam kettle scented, draped over her chair like a placeholder that wouldn't let her rewrite the night as loneliness. When the doors closed behind him, the room stayed inhabited. The pre-brief with the CFO tried to turn the clock into a weapon. "We can soften it," he said into the speaker, meaning her letter. "Add language about maximizing shareholder value. Signal we're in learning mode." "I'm not softening truth into pablum," she said. "And if we're in learning mode, the first lesson is that we don't sell people out." A pause. "You say that in the room, you'll lose 2 votes. "Maybe I should," she said quietly. "Maybe I've been keeping votes I don't want to live with." The line went careful. "They'll say you're emotional. I am. Emotion is information," she said. "So is data. So is the fact we've never once hit our best numbers by pretending we weren't human." He sighed the way finance sighs when feelings show up with a spreadsheet. "I'll back your language. You know my reservations." "I do." She let herself feel grateful and didn't apologize for it. "Thank you." At 7:42, Malik texted a single photo, a paper box twined with red and white string, a stamped lemon slice on the corner. Under it 3 words, 2 minutes out. She felt ridiculous for how the words warmed her. She put the jacket on. She didn't need to. Her office was already comfortable. But it was the right agreement for this morning, the weight of it across her shoulders, the memory stitched into the seams. He arrived like a good answer. No fanfare, just the exact thing she'd asked for at the exact time she needed it. The box came first, the scent following a beat later, bright citrus and heat, that ginger edge that insisted your blood wake up. "Still want a witness?" he asked. "Yes," she said, "but stay out of the line of fire. These people bite." "I brought pastry," he said, untying the string. "Most biters soften with sugar." They ate at the glass, standing, the city below, so washed it looked newborn. The hand pies were ridiculous, flaky, tart, a little dangerous. "This is what kindness tastes like," she murmured, licking lemon from her thumb, not caring that the gesture was anything but executive. "Kindness is a skill," he said. "You practice it, or you lose it." She looked at him then, really looked, the scar along his knuckles like an old word rewritten, the sure way he occupied space without claiming more than he'd been given, the quiet that made other people louder with themselves. "Stay after?" she asked. She didn't define after. Some things don't want fences. "I'll be down in the lobby," he said. "If you need to scan a face that isn't asking anything, look through the glass stairs, left side. I'll be the tall man counting to 6. She laughed, nerves unspooling. Deal. The boardroom at 8 smelled faintly of old coffee and new money. Faces arranged themselves into patterns she knew. Friendly, cautious, opportunistic, bored. The chair cleared his throat. "Nora, walk us through your proposal." She didn't sit at first. She stood with both hands on the back of her chair, grounded by the contact, and read. The letter called the sale what it was, a necessary valve, not a victory. It protected the core team by proposing a spin-out with clear equity, not lip service. It named the engineers who'd built the line as the asset they were, not as numbers to be offloaded. It promised nothing she couldn't deliver and refused to apologize to profits for centering people. The first question came sharp, like a knife you test on your thumb. "You sound passionate," one investor said. "This is business." "Business is made of people," Nora said. "We pretend it's not because math is easier to talk over. The math still works, I've shown you, and I won't sell what I can't sleep with." The CFO lifted a hand, a small yes in the middle of no. "We have the model for a limited divest with retention of key IP. Her numbers hold. They aren't the highest possible. They are the most survivable." The chair steepled his fingers. "And optics? We've had a rough quarter." "Optics improve when we tell the truth," she said. "We'll say, we chose to keep the people who make us valuable. We're refocusing. We're not apologizing for not being a hedge fund." Someone snorted. Someone else almost smiled. Votes were signals long before they were counts. She could feel the room slide. She sat then, placed both palms on the table, open, visible, and laid out the terms with the exactness of someone hemming a dress so it wouldn't betray her in a long day. There would be a 24-hour pause for internal opt-ins to the spin-out. Severance would be real, not performative. NDAs would not preclude workers from future work on their own inventions. It was not radical, it was honourable. When the vote came, it was not unanimous. It didn't have to be. The motion carried. The chair nodded as if he'd won a chess endgame he hadn't understood until her last move. "Proceed," he said. "You'll answer to the numbers by Q3. "I always do," she said, not unkindly. Her hands shook only after. Elevators again. The corridor again. The glass stairwell that spiraled down to the lobby like a helix of decisions. She walked until the blur of motion resolved into the shape of one man in a canvas jacket, head tilted up because he knew where she'd look for him. Malik. Counting, she could tell. 4, 6. She descended. At the last landing she stopped because that was the agreement with herself. Paused before the end so you can mark what you survived. He didn't climb to meet her and pull her across his victory. He waited the way night had waited for morning. Sure, patient. "How did it go?" he asked when she reached him, the question roomy enough for disaster. "I didn't sell anyone out," she said, voice breaking on the first word, steady on the rest. "We're selling less than they wanted. We're saving more than I feared." He grinned, not the big movie kind, the kind that starts in relief and lands in respect. Then breakfast worked. She laughed, gave in to the tremor that wanted its share of her body, and after a beat to let the moment ask permission, stepped into his space. "May I?" she said, hands hovering near his shoulders. "Always ask. Today, yes," he said, and opened his arms with that same plain generosity he'd offered her breath. She folded into him the way two truths meet. Softly, without fanfare, certain. He was warm and the city smelled like rain and cinnamon and something earned. They didn't kiss, not because they didn't want to, but because wanting has its own exquisite patience. He rested his chin lightly near her temple. She could feel his laugh when he said, "I told you Lemon was bossy." "And Ginger," she said. "It's a tyrant disguised as a friend." "It's a friend disguised as a tyrant," he murmured, "like good change, like boardrooms with air." She pulled back, enough to see his face. "Come upstairs," she said, "not to fix anything, to stand with me while I tell the team what I fought for. Then there's a roof. The storm left the sky new. I'll stand where you point," he said, "and when you need to breathe, I'll count." They rode the elevator up like co-conspirators, the car bright and unapologetic. On 37, her assistant did a double take at the sight of the delivery driver beside the CEO, and then wisely turned that surprise into a smile. The team gathered in the open area. She told them the plan, the pause, the spin-out. She didn't make it pretty. She made it clear. People cried for different reasons. After, they climbed one more flight to the roof. The city sprawled, tender and enormous. Clouds moved like muscle. Wind combed her hair and took nothing she didn't want to give. Malik leaned on the rail a respectful inch away. "So," he said, half to the horizon, "what's the next kind thing you can afford?" "Feeding the people who stayed," she said. "Calling the ones who go. Protecting the work from the worst language we could use on it. Eating another hand pie." She glanced at him. "Asking you to stay tonight. Not because I need saving. Because yesterday we survived something together, and I'd like to let that matter." He turned, the morning in his eyes. "I can stay," he said. "Not to fix, to witness, to cook later if your kitchen can handle honesty." "My kitchen," she said, thinking of the bone-white island that had never seemed to belong to anyone until now, "could use a little truth." "Truth is hotter than it looks," he warned, smiling. "I'm thick enough to take the heat," she said, and watched the line land, not as a flirt, but as recognition. She was more than the silhouette rooms tried to make her into. She was the woman who'd kept the thing that kept them human. "Then we'll cook," he said, "tonight." She took his hand, not a claim, just a link, and let the city witness them both. The storm had changed everything without asking permission. So would they.